In the peaceful town of Maple Ridge, nestled near the rolling hills and dense woods, lived a man named Ben Thatcher. Ben was a quiet, unassuming man who spent most of his days working as a local carpenter. His life was simple, and he found peace in the small moments, like tending to his garden or taking long walks in the nearby forest. Nature had always been Ben's escape, a place where he could clear his mind and find solace in the beauty of the world around him. One warm summer evening, after a long day of work, Ben decided to take a walk along the river that wound its way through the edge of the forest. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow on the water, and the air was filled with the sounds of birds singing and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. As he strolled along the riverbank, Ben's mind drifted, thinking about nothing in particular, simply enjoying the tranquility of the moment. Suddenly, a sharp cry pierced the stillness of the evening. It was a sound of distress, unlike anything Ben had ever heard before. He stopped in his tracks, his heart racing as he scanned the area, trying to locate the source of the noise. The sound came again, this time more frantic. Ben hurried toward the river, his eyes darting from side to side. Then in the distance, he saw it, a small figure struggling in the water. It was a fawn, barely able to keep its head above the surface, its legs kicking weakly as the current threatened to pull it under. Without a second thought, Ben sprinted toward the riverbank. His heart pounded in his chest as he reached the water's edge and plunged in without hesitation. The water was colder than he had expected, and the current was stronger, but Ben pushed through, his arms slicing through the water as he swam toward the struggling fawn. The little creature was panicking, its eyes wide with fear as it fought to stay afloat. Ben reached out and grabbed the fawn around its middle, pulling it close to his chest. With the fawn in his arms, Ben swam back toward the shore, fighting against the current. His muscles burned, and his breath came in ragged gasps. But he didn't stop. He could feel the fawn trembling against him, its heart beating wildly, and he knew he couldn't let it go. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ben reached the riverbank and hauled himself out of the water, still clutching the exhausted fawn. Ben laid the fawn gently on the grass and knelt beside it, his hands shaking from the adrenaline. The little creature was soaked and shivering, its legs splayed awkwardly beneath it. For a moment, Ben feared that he might have been too late, but then the fawn blinked, its large, dark eyes looking up at him with a mix of fear and gratitude. Ben's heart swelled with relief. He gently stroked the fawn's head, whispering softly, "It's okay now. You're safe." The fawn didn't move for a while, too weak from the ordeal to stand. Ben stayed with it, keeping a careful watch to make sure it was breathing steadily. As the minutes passed, the fawn seemed to regain some strength. Slowly it lifted its head, its tiny nose twitching as it took in its surroundings. Ben knew the fawn wouldn't be able to survive on its own just yet. It was far too young, and its mother was nowhere in sight. He couldn't leave it there, so he decided to take the fawn home with him, at least for the night, until he could figure out what to do next. Carrying the fawn gently in his arms, Ben made his way back to his small house on the edge of town. He set up a warm bed for the fawn in his living room, using soft towels and blankets. The fawn curled up in the makeshift bed, still trembling slightly, but looking much more at ease now that it was safe and warm. Over the next few days, Ben cared for the fawn as if it were his own. He fed it milk from a bottle, made sure it stayed warm, and kept a close watch on its health. The fawn grew stronger with each passing day, and soon it was able to stand on its wobbly legs and explore Ben's house. Much to his amusement, Ben had always loved animals, but he had never expected to form such a bond with a wild creature. He named the fawn Willow, after the tall, graceful trees that lined the river where he had found her. Willow followed Ben around the house, her large, innocent eyes always watching him, as if she knew that he was the one who had saved her life. Ben couldn't help but grow attached to the little deer. It was as if they shared a special connection, one born out of the fawn's near-death experience and Ben's instinct to save her. However, Ben knew that Willow didn't belong in his house forever. She was a wild animal, and as much as he had grown to love her, he knew that one day she would need to return to the forest where she belonged. After a few weeks, when Willow had fully recovered and grown strong enough to fend for herself, Ben made the difficult decision to release her back into the wild. It was a bittersweet moment for him. As he walked with Willow to the edge of the forest, he felt a lump form in his throat. He knelt down beside her one last time, stroking her soft fur. "You'll be okay out here," he whispered, though the words were more for his own comfort than hers. Willow nuzzled his hand, and for a moment, Ben thought she might not want to leave. But then, with one last look at him, she turned and trotted off into the woods, disappearing into the trees. Ben stood there for a long time, watching the spot where she had vanished, his heart heavy but filled with hope. He knew it was the right thing to do, but saying goodbye to Willow was one of the hardest things he had ever done. Years passed, and life went on. Ben often thought about Willow and wondered what had become of her. Did she survive? Did she find her way in the wild? These questions lingered in his mind, but he knew that he would probably never see her again. Then, one rainy autumn afternoon, something incredible happened. Ben was sitting on his porch watching the rain fall when he heard a rustling in the bushes nearby. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but then he heard it again, closer this time. Curious, Ben stood up and walked toward the sound. As he approached the edge of the forest, his heart began to race. There, standing at the edge of the trees, was a full-grown deer. Its coat was sleek and wet from the rain, and its eyes were large and familiar. Ben's breath caught in his throat as the deer took a step forward, and then another. It was Willow. He could feel it in his bones. The deer walked right up to him, and Ben felt tears welling in his eyes. He knelt down, reaching out his hand, and to his amazement, the deer nuzzled his palm, just as Willow had done all those years ago. Tears streamed down Ben's face as he realized that Willow had come back to him. She had survived in the wild, and now she had returned to the man who had saved her life. Ben whispered her name, his voice choked with emotion, and the deer blinked at him, as if to say she remembered. For a long time, Ben stayed there, sitting with Willow, his heart full of love and gratitude. The bond they had shared all those years ago had never been broken. It had only grown stronger. But as the rain began to fall harder, something unexpected happened. Another deer emerged from the woods, a young fawn, just as small and fragile as Willow had been when Ben had first found her. The fawn stood close to Willow, looking up at Ben with curious eyes. Ben's heart swelled with emotion as he realized what had happened. Willow had returned not just to visit him, but to show him her own baby, a fawn she had raised in the wild, just as Ben had once cared for her. Tears of joy streamed down Ben's face as he watched Willow and her fawn standing together. It was as if life had come full circle. He had saved Willow when she was just a baby, and now she had brought her own baby to meet him, as if to thank him for the kindness he had shown her all those years ago. In that moment, Ben knew that his bond with Willow would last forever. She had returned to him, not just once but twice, showing him that love and gratitude transcended time and species. And though it broke his heart to see her leave once more, Ben knew that Willow and her fawn would always be a part of his life, just as he had been a part of theirs. As Willow and her fawn disappeared into the forest once more, Ben stood there, his heart full of both sadness and joy. He wiped the tears from his eyes and smiled, knowing that he had been a part of something truly special, something that would stay with him for the rest of his life.